Before I went on my vacation trip down south to my mom and my dad, I did an interview about a week before I actually left home with Mark Watt, the creator of the awesome granular synthesis app SpaceCraft. And it turns out that SpaceCraft was actually built by a rocket scientist. Hello and welcome to haQ. My name is Jakob. I'm your host and you're watching a haQ episode. So in this episode, we're going to have a look at SpaceCraft right here. And I want to begin by introducing you to its designer, Mark Watt.
I'm actually a spacecraft control systems engineer. I work on interplanetary science missions for the European Space Agency. So, for example, missions to the Sun or mission to like Lagrange points to do gravitational astronomy or Mars rover, for example, and also Earth observation missions. Yeah, so in my job, I have to do mathematical engineering coding in something called MATLAB mainly. I love it. It's really amazing. It's really hard work. It's very intense, but it's really, really cool. And I've got quite a lot of coding experience in that context, but this is like the first time I'm doing a self-contained product.
And it is a very cool product at that. Now, as soon as SpaceCraft came out and I saw it, I was just attracted to it simply because of the colors and, it did have a very low price. And I do think it still has a very low price. In fact, I think it's underpriced.
I actually just went with my instinct on that, honestly. I kept thinking of putting it higher, but I just kept feeling I want a lot of people to use it. I'd rather there more people use it than I get more, profit from it. But at the end of the day, it was my instinct telling me £3, and so I just went with that.
And I do think it was a brilliant move putting the price that low because it did allow a lot of musicians, especially those with a tighter budget, to get a hold of a great granular synthesizer app. Or is it a sample player app? You see, granular synthesis is a very specific form of synthesis, and that's something I want to clarify here. Okay, so stick with me and I'll explain the basics of granular synthesis, and then I'll have Mark jump in and explain how SpaceCraft works. Okay, so granular synthesis is basically based on sampling. However, samples are not played back in a conventional way. They are basically split into tiny pieces around 1 to 60, or is it 50 or something, milliseconds. Yes, we're talking milliseconds. In other words, grains, as in granular. So now you know where the name comes from. These grains can then be layered on top of each other at various frequencies, volumes, and filterings, and there's just so many ways that you can do this. And every app developer or hardware developer utilizes this type of synthesis in a wide range of ways. But that's basically the basics. Granular synthesis is when you're using tiny samples. Now, the way that you control grain sizes or grain lengths inside SpaceCraft is with the grain control. And so I'm gonna let Mark explain how that works.
One of the things about SpaceCraft is that a lot of the time when you're playing it, you're not actually doing granular synthesis per se. If you use really long duration grains, you're actually just layering lots of different frequency samples on top of each other. So that's like the bottom right, where you have that like lots of long samples fading in and out over the top of each other at different pitches and things. And that's not really granular synthesis because their grains are so long, they can be like seconds long. If you go to the bottom left, then you're playing more like arpeggiator. That's definitely not granular synthesis. That's just playing samples in a tempo. But then if you go up to the top, and especially up to the top right, that's where you start to go into granular world. And that's where if you had a set of notes making an arpeggio, they will all come together in a chord. And so you can basically, with the same sample and the same settings, you can morph in and out of between arpeggiator to granular to kind of everything layered on top of each other. It's always been part of the design to do that.
Now, I can only speak for myself, but I really love the way that SpaceCraft works and how it's designed and how easy and simple it is to get into. You don't really have to think about it when you're using the app. It is so clear to me that this was designed by someone who wanted to have a user experience that was anything but cumbersome. Everything is right there at the tip of your fingers, no complicated menus to go into, even if there is actually a kind of a menu section, but the menu isn't really heavy.
There's something that I wanted to make sure was that in order to use the instrument, you don't have to go and set anything up. So you don't have to root anything, you don't have to assign anything. It's just all set up for you. And I love more like complex instruments where you do have the kind of control and you can go and you can play with all the stuff. I love that side of it as well. But for this one, for me, I wanted it to be, it's all set up for you and it's done in a way that's very kind of musical and easy and fun.
By the way, you can find the menu if you press the cogwheel up in the upper right corner in each of the Grain Player windows. Here you can set the pitch and ring modulator to either a free tuning mode or a scale mode. You can set the scales for the sequencer/keyboard kind of thing. You also have an option of 3 different waveforms for the LFO, something that we're going to take a look at in a bit. Now, here is something that has been added since SpaceCraft was released. It's a syncing function for the grain control. Remember how SpaceCraft can do granular synthesis and regular sample replaying? Well, when you're doing the sample replaying thing, you can actually get this keyboard/sequencer thing to play more of a pattern type sequence instead. And this can now be synced to a tempo, which is so useful. Yes, SpaceCraft is constantly being worked on by Mark, and I'm quite sure that we'll see more awesome additional features being added in the future. SpaceCraft basically consists of 2 sample grain player windows, and we only really have to look at one in order to understand how it works. Now, both of these windows can run independently of one another, so you can basically have the grain control here synced to a tempo, while the other window is running unsynced with its grain control. Now, here we have the main performance view, and this is where you place your sampling node. And so what you're doing sideways is choosing the spot from which the node will sample from, and you're controlling the volume when you're moving the node up or down. Now, if we look up here, we can find the sample range selector, and it basically does what it says. It's a range selector for your sample. So if you're loading very long samples and you want to get to that specific spot where you have that guitar sound sampled, well, then you just use this window so you can narrow it down into that spot. So there is a function in here that I find just brilliant, and it is the way that you can use the LFO to modulate the node. Meaning, instead of getting those regular static playing sounds, having the node sampling from the same spot, you can actually make it move by using the LFO, which is brilliant. It breaks the staticness and it makes the sound become more alive, especially if you're using audio material that is rich with varying dynamic textures. yes, don't you just love that? To the side here we can find the sequencer / keyboard thing where you actually place your notes. You can get this to play chords and you can get this to play sequences depending on how you're using the grain control. And yeah, it's just very fun to experiment with, and I really don't think that you need a tutorial in order to get going here. Now beside it we have a pitch control, which also doubles up as a ring modulator, and placed right above it we have the filter / reverb. Now this is a combined thing, so you're controlling the amount of reverb when you're sliding upwards, and sideways, well, that's how you control the actual filtering. Yes, I think that most of you watching this could agree with me when I say SpaceCraft has been really well designed. And talking about design, now when SpaceCraft came out, it could be loaded as an audio unit extension, AUV3 for short. And the thing is, it wasn't working properly. Anyone ever wondered why that was the case? Well, listen to what Mark had to say about it.
I hadn't used anything except GarageBand before I released this. It was really designed as a standalone. I was aware of AU and things like that. I knew that I could use it as an AU in GarageBand and so on. But I never really expected to cover that side of things from the point of release. I thought I would do that afterwards if there was interest in the app, you know. I made the mistake of compiling it as an AU without realizing that if people can see it as an AU, loads and loads of people are going to use it as an AU, and in all these crazy ways that I'm just starting to learn about, and in these amazing programs like AUM and things like that, and using it within this kind of AU sort of ecosystem. And obviously it was absolutely nowhere near ready to be used for that when I released it. It has been a bit intense, trying to do this stuff as a reactive thing.
So, whenever I interview developers, I always ask about the obstacles they came across, how long it took to make a certain thing, an app or piece of hardware or whatever it might be that I'm interviewing them about. Weirdly phrased sentence, but that's just the way I talk, I guess. And most of the times I get to find out some really interesting bits.
The kind of predecessor at SpaceCraft was actually developed in Reactor. And it was a horrendous beast. It was quite high on CPU as well. And so I decided I wanted the touchscreen thing because it's like a no-brainer for granular synthesis sort of interaction stuff. And then I tried messing around. I actually built a MIDI controller with an Arduino and some touch strips on a floorboard and tried controlling it with that, and that was pretty cool. And then I wanted to go for the touchscreen, and then I stumbled across this Juice framework. Once I started messing around with that, and I saw the potential in this framework, I just had this vision of doing primarily a touchscreen experience, iOS and Android, and then it just all kind of went from there. Well, I started doing the Reactor version maybe a couple of years ago, and it's that sort of hobby you do in your spare time, just on and off. But I started making the app in Juice about 7 months ago. This is a bit crazy because I've been doing this in my spare time.
Now, there are a lot of granular synthesizers out there, or granular synth apps, or granular sample, blah, 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 blah. And I'm always curious, not only when it comes to granular synthesis, when it comes to any type of synthesis or any kind of drum machine, when you already have a lot of them out there. I'm wondering, whenever a new one comes out, did this developer happen to look at the other ones? Or did this developer just design it without knowing what was out there? And so I asked Mark about that, and he gave a very interesting answer.
Initially, I didn't look at any because I had a really strong vision for what SpaceCraft was going to be, and I didn't want to be influenced by other things and maybe worry that it's maybe too similar to something else or whatever. But then at one point I did have a look, and I was kind of dreading it. And the first thing I found was Borderlands, and Borderlands totally blew my mind. I thought, wow, this is incredible. And it's so optimized, it's so well done, and there's so much control. So I was like, doing that made me feel a bit like, oh God, here we go. And then I looked at Idensity, and I thought, this is really cool stuff. And Tardigrade as well. I was very impressed with them. I was very impressed. And so I had a bit of a moment where I thought, oh man, maybe I should have looked at this before. But then I did remind myself, I just realized that what I'm doing is right. I just had a think about it, and I thought, no, I'm on the path that I should be on, and I'm just going to keep doing it. And I didn't change anything, I mean, the great thing with granular synthesis, it's so flexible and powerful, and you can do so much with it, and you can really do a lot in terms of the way you interact with it. And I just feel like there was a niche for me to fill.
I would definitely agree with Mark on this one. There was a niche to fill, and that is a sequencer-esque granular synthesizer / granular sampler. Because of this sequencer / keyboard thing and the way it works, it can very easily be used to sequence your sounds instead. You can get some of the same results with Borderlands Granular, but since SpaceCraft has its own scaling system, well, it just makes sequencing melodies or making chords a very different process from what you have to do if you're using Borderlands Granular. And if you really want to see how SpaceCraft compares to other granular synthesizers like Borderlands Granular and Tardigrade specifically, then I've got a really great video for you. I've linked to it at the end of this episode, and I've also linked to it down in the description, where you can also find a link for SpaceCraft, which you should go grab today. It costs almost nothing, and it's so much fun to play with. Now, I want to thank you so much for watching this video, and if you liked this video, you want to see more of this, then the first thing you should do is just go down there and hit that like button, because I can't even tell you how much that helps here on YouTube. Whenever you interact with one of my videos, they basically get pushed up on the list to be referred to other people, showing up in the video searches and stuff. So whenever you comment and hit the like button, you're helping out a bunch. Now, there are other ways of supporting me, and I would really want to recommend that you at least consider joining up on Patreon, especially now that Apple has decided to cut us off from the Apple affiliate program when it comes to apps. The affiliate program works like this. I talk about apps, music apps specifically, and I put links down in the description. That little link has a little token on it, telling Apple that the link came from me, from my account, my affiliate account. So whenever you buy an app through one of my links, then Apple sees that, and then they give me a commission. It's a small percentage of the app price, and they do that in order to make an incentive for people to vlog and blog about apps. It's the same thing for iBooks and Apple Music stuff, and now they've just decided to cut that off. And for me, it's a hit. I can tell you that it is a hit. But for people like Tim Webb of Discord or Doug Woods from the Sound Test Room, it's a massive hit to their income. It's a massive hit. So now more than ever, if you really want to support app vloggers like myself, like Doug Woods from the Sound Test Room, like Tim from Discord, if you want to help Tom Weiss from Synth Anatomy, Mitch the Audio Dabbler, Dean from Electronic Sounds. There are more out there, you know. If you want to support us, then at least consider joining up on our Patreon accounts. Not all of them at once. Just choose the one that you like the best and just jump on there. Just don't force yourself into doing it if you can't afford it. If you feel you don't want to, don't force yourself. There's always PayPal me links. I have one, it's right there. Others have it too, and there are other ways. And if you subscribe, don't forget to press that little bell thing, because that way you'll always get notified. Well, actually, no, not always. I've had people tell me that they don't get notified even when they have the bell thing clicked in. Just tap it in just tap in that bell thing if you subscribe. As usual, I wish you a very productive week. Now go finger all of your stuff and have a lot of fun doing it.